So I'm just doing a quick video for The Amazing Atheist, who's someone I quite like, and any other people who didn't understand why this isn't the sort of whoops moment you would think it is on the surface, because this has been a very strange time in, well, I was going to say British politics, but politics in general, and things have become very difficult to predict. So I said Tories win a majority on a pro-Brexit platform. Labour suffer humiliating defeat, Corbyn is forced to resign. Now, there's a lot behind each one of those statements, and I think that the people who have been following British politics closely will understand what I mean. First off, having a relatively Brexit-focused platform was the smartest thing anyone could have done in this election. It wasn't the number one issue in the election to most people in the electorate, but that's, I think, because they don't really understand how much overhangs the British economy and just the country on the Brexit vote. If it doesn't go well, then we have problems. And I'm going to do another video about this at some point, because I really think that we are worrying too much, because there's so much at stake. It's just in everyone's best interest to swallow a bit of pride and get on with it. But anyway, the point is, Theresa May had come out strong. The public was generally behind her on Brexit as well. And so she should have simply just repeated her points. There was nothing to lose, and she could have gone full anti-immigration, and she could have gone full NHS, which she did. This is an aggregate of the polling at the time. This, around here, is where I made my prediction. So Labour were not even at their lowest ebb at the time. They had just enjoyed a remarkable decline, and the Conservatives were not even at their highest ebb. This was just the trend that was happening at the time. Of course, this was in April. This was the situation in Britain for the four most prominent issues facing the country in this election on May the 9th and 10th. This is about 8 to 9 days before the Conservatives released their manifesto. Brexit was unsurprisingly one of the top ones, which the Conservatives had a huge lead over. The economy in general, again, very closely tied. Conservatives had a huge lead. And asylum and immigration, again, the Conservatives had a huge lead. The only one that Labour had is the NHS, and that's because Labour never stopped talking about the NHS. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm in full support of the NHS, but Labour treat the NHS like it is some kind of holy mission. And it's annoying, frankly, the extent that they will go on about the NHS like it is some sacred good. And it's like, okay, I agree with the NHS too, guys, but... And the thing is, the Conservatives weren't against the NHS either. They know that that was an untenable position. But anyway, and like I said, this was before they released their manifesto. You can pretty much see where the Conservatives released their manifesto is the point where they started going downwards, because the Conservative manifesto was terrible. But you really do have to give Labour their credit. They worked for the result they got, and it was a much better result than anyone was expecting, even though it was still a loss. But this is the point. Labour got out there, they canvassed, and they were very effective on social media. Their activists were highly engaged. No one was particularly engaged with the Conservatives, because frankly there was nothing to get engaged about with Theresa May. She's totally unmemeable. Anything you do to meme her just makes her look like a villain, and so it's just not worth doing anything. And the thing is, I don't think anyone supports her personally as much as the people supporting Jeremy Corbyn actually support Jeremy Corbyn. It's just that most people don't support Jeremy Corbyn. But anyway, the Conservatives released their manifesto, and it was cancerous. It was just the worst thing anyone has seen. It was full of political blunders. It was literally, it was incredible. Because for people who are outside of the country, you may not know, but Britain is a nation of animal lovers. We are weird about how innocent we think animals are. And it's to the point where we can't stand like badger baiting, fox hunting, poaching, anything like that. And you see these adverts on TV. This is something the British public just will not put up with. They are staunchly against animal abuse, and it's entirely to their credit. Don't get me wrong. It's an incredibly strong moral position the British have, and I know that other countries don't actually feel as strongly about this as the British do, and so it can look weird from the outside in. But it's genuinely something that pisses them off, especially if those animals are cute and they happen to live in your local area. Maybe sometimes you'll see one crossing the street in the middle of the night or something. It's not a good idea to start suggesting that bringing back the ivory trade or perhaps fox hunting is a vote winner. But even then, they are just like, they're not even major problems. They're not even major problems. The major problems were the death tax, the dementia tax, just anything punitive against the old or the poor was a bad idea. And then the internet regulation really sealed it for a lot of people. It was just, just such a bad manifesto, and no one could predict that they would do anything this ludicrous, and that's what it was. The manifesto was absolute lunacy that was written by a small cabal of people around Theresa May. So it's nice to hear from someone who was working in 10 Downing Street, who can confirm this and say that they were staggered by the arrogance of Nick Timothy and Fiona Hill, two of the people who were her closest advisors, two of the people who had direct impact on the manifesto. The manifesto wasn't just bad, it was classist, is the best way I think I can put it, because most of the policies that were in the manifesto were actually rather well favoured by most people. So this was a poll that was done shortly after the manifesto came out, and so the Conservative policy of increasing the spending on the NHS, highly supported. Requiring non-EU migrants to pay more to use the NHS, highly supported. Increasing the national living wage to 60% of median earnings, highly supported. In fact, a lot of the Conservative policies were actually relatively popular. A lot more popular than a lot of the Lib Dem policies and a lot of the Labour policies. But the problem is that the Conservatives had some absolute slaps in the face. Like I said, the dementia tax, the housing, the death tax, these things are effectively classist, because people who are poor don't really get involved with that. People who are rich don't really have a problem with that, but it very much is against the sort of working middle class and the retired middle class that these are affected. And then bringing back things like the, in trying to decriminalise the ivory trade or whatever it was, and bringing back fox hunting, highly aristocratic and totally rejected by the overwhelming majority of the public. They don't like these things. And again, these weren't even that big a deal. The internet regulation thing was just ridiculous. I mean, everyone wants people to do something about terrorism, but that was just not it. And instead of looking strong and looking like she knew what she was doing and looking like she was actually going to help reduce terrorism, which before she had done anything, I think people would have thought that she would. The manifesto, that was just an absolute shit show. I mean, the experts just came out of the woodwork saying, look, this isn't going to work. This is not going to work. And then you had other experts coming out saying, you're not going to be able to do this. There is no way you're going to be able to do this at all. So it blew up in their faces. And the manifesto was just horrifically unpopular. And then you have Theresa May's refusal to debate. This allowed the Labour Party and everyone else to just take giant steaming shits on Theresa May personally, metaphorically speaking, repeatedly, all the way through the campaign. There was just no arguing with it. Theresa May is afraid to debate. Of course she is. Her manifesto was awful. There was nothing to stand on. She was never going to win any of these debates, and so she abstained. But if you abstain from a debate, and I've said this before, I've said this about the social justice warriors, if you don't come to the debate and fight in your corner, you concede the fight. You let your opponent win when you don't turn up. And that's what happened repeatedly. Not only that, Theresa May was the most uncharismatic person in the Labour Party. And, I mean, she did okay when she wasn't really being challenged, because she had that kind of aristocratic air about her of competence. And that was fine, because when it comes to something like Brexit, I think that a lot of people are probably okay with what they perceive to be a confident, competent, and dare I say, I think they probably do appreciate the aristocratic tone sometimes when it comes to a decision like Brexit, when it comes to a major country affected, an entire nation is affected by this. So I guess, I'm guessing, and I don't have any data, I'm just, from what I know talking to people and from what I've seen from the opinion polls, it seems that people were generally in favour of Theresa May, even though it's not like Theresa May has ever been an amazing politician or anything, but I'm not going to go into the backstory of it. But I think people were generally like, okay, she's going to do what's best for the country. She's going to make sure that Britain as an entity is going to come out on the other side of this as strong as possible, and we'll get as good as we can get, we'll give as good as we can give, and it will be okay. Unlike Jeremy Corbyn, who will just sign away, whatever, as long as he feels good about it. And anyway. But the point is, I think that we knew after the numerous revelations from this manifesto that there was something wrong in Theresa May's campaign. And the stony silence at the Tory HQ when the exit polls showed the lead had evaporated, well, that pretty much confirms it, doesn't it? I mean, it's not like... What on earth did they think they were doing? But this is the thing. They honestly must have thought that they could go as far as they liked. They obviously thought, look, we want some ridiculous things to happen, things that people are never going to agree with. But since we are so far ahead, and Jeremy Corbyn and his team, the Labour Party in general, are so awful, and for anyone, again, outside of British politics, the Shadow Chancellor was a communist. Diane Abbott was an idiot. Jeremy Corbyn himself is totally unlikable, and has a penchant for turning up at rallies where the hammer and sickle is being widely flown. Corbyn is so ludicrously unelectable that he addressed a rally with a bunch of crazy extremists. Who? Oh, what's that? Hook Hand Abu Hamza? Unfucking believable. Unbelievable. At the base of Trafalgar Square, at the Trafalgar Monument. And they were calling for they were chanting "Gas the Jews," apparently. And it's just like, how the fuck can anyone elect this guy? He is just... It's unreal. And so they must have been thinking something along the lines of, look, this idiot is never going to be popular with the British public. I mean, he seems to be distinctly anti-British. Just against Britain as a nation. He seems to be opposed to it, and seems to love every single one of our enemies. And they must have been banking on Brexit and immigration, and thinking that they could do no wrong. And so they say, by 1 AM this has been replaced by nerves and silence. Horrific was the word used to describe the mood. Another source said the atmosphere was very quiet, and people just disappeared as it became apparent what happened. At this point, the campaign went into lockdown. Senior cabinet ministers, including Boris Johnson and Philip Hammond, along with senior allies, could not get their calls returned. The blackout lifted a couple of hours later when CCHQ once again convinced itself that it could just about secure an overall majority, and senior figures started reaching out once more. This is how shocking this is to them. I mean, the idea that they would push through, or attempt to push through some of these policies. I mean, there was no need for the Conservatives to even write a manifesto. They didn't need one. They had been in government for since 2010. And that was under a coalition with the Lib Dems, and then they got a majority. I mean, this was an election nobody needed to call. This didn't need to happen. They didn't need to write a manifesto. But instead, what they did is called an election, which, on the surface, I mean, I said this was a good idea, because I really didn't think they would try and return Britain to what was effectively like the 19th century. You know, a sweep in every chimney. A little orphan boy with a stick and a cup on every corner. You know, this was the sort of impression the manifesto was giving across to people. It was totally out of touch and totally reprehensible. It was indefensible. It was just shocking. Honestly, you could not have predicted it, which is clearly what the fellow Tory MPs were thinking when they went fucking mental over this. We didn't shoot ourselves in the foot. We shot ourselves in the head. You're damn fucking right you did. Good God, no one saw this manifesto coming, as far as I can tell. And it seems to have been a complete shock. I mean, George Osborne was not kind either. But anyway, MP Nigel Evans said the Tory campaign had been hijacked by ourselves after the party's poorly received social care policies took a full frontal assault on the core vote. And that's really true. I mean, targeting the elderly, who were the majority Brexit voters and often vote Conservative anyway, was just ridiculous. I mean, why? No one could understand it. Why are you targeting them? Why are you targeting the inheritors? Why are you targeting... Did they target the inheritors? Oh, the dementia tax. Why are you targeting the social care for the elderly? You are relying on the elderly vote. For some reason, you target these people. It's absolute insanity. And so, yeah, he's like, we shot ourselves in the head. The grand design at the beginning had been shot, of course, and we did it to ourselves. You absolutely did. I mean, Theresa May's dreadful campaign was... I don't think it was the great leveler here. I think The campaign itself, I mean, don't get me wrong, she ran a terrible campaign. Debating was a terrible thing to do. But if her manifesto had been solid, or she just hadn't written one, then there would be nothing to really complain about. Where she would just go, well, look, I'm just going to carry on doing what I'm doing. I don't need to debate Jeremy Corbyn. You know, the British public will decide whether they like him or not, but I think that you can look at the polls and see what they've already decided, and I have a country to run, so I'm going to get on with it. She would have been just fine. She could have been austere, but respectable, and it would have been no problem at all. But she completely lost the plot. Absolutely lost the plot. And she looked nervous as well. If you watch the, it wasn't a debate, but it was like a question and answer session that her and Corbyn had with the audience. And she looked like she was almost pleading with people to vote for her. No, that's the complete wrong way to go about this. Whereas Corbyn looked like, with his campaign, they looked like they were having a lot of fun and really getting into it. I mean, they looked like they cared. So I'm not surprised they actually won so many people on, I'm not going to say charisma, but presence alone. But the MP said they actually had some very good policies, but criticised the appalling way they were presented and the deeply flawed U-turn on social care costs. And that's the thing. There were a lot of the policies that were okay, but there were some policies that were so tone-deaf and just, I mean, offensive to people. That was the thing. A lot of the things that were in the social care stuff was just deeply offensive to people. And that's why it resonated, and that's why it became such a big story. And the fact that she U-turned, I mean, even then, that could be turned to your advantage. You can turn almost anything to your advantage in a situation like this, if you just know how to do it. You could say, well, look, I'm listening to the British people. You know, I mean, we're trying to get the deficit down after Labour gave us a huge deficit. Not the debt itself, which the Tories increased, but given how Labour wants to increase it by 250 billion as well, it's hardly like they were in a position to go, well, you want to increase the debt. So anyway. But he said that there would be a big post-mortem to understand why Mrs May decided to take those gambles on unpopular manifesto pledges. Well, I think we all know why. I think Theresa May thought she could get away with it. So going back to this, yeah, I thought that they were going to focus heavily on Brexit, focus on the popular points of that manifesto, and I honestly thought, given the data, and like I said, we weren't even at the nadir then, we were about here. Then they still had further down to go, and the Conservatives still had further up to go when I'd made this tweet. So yeah, I thought Labour were going to suffer a humiliating defeat, which everyone else was expecting. I mean, if you look at the replies to that, the first replies were people saying, well, that's hardly an impressive thing. I've got one from Sean and Jen going, well, the sun's going to rise tomorrow. What other predictions have you got? You know, there's nothing clever there. But the Jeremy Corbyn forced to resign thing, that's actually got a bit of weight behind it. And this is the thing. Corbyn has been a surprise rising star in the Labour Party. He's been in politics for like 30 years as a backbencher, but he hasn't done anything. As far as I'm aware, he has not even proposed one piece of legislation. I don't even know what he's bloody done. I mean, all I can find is him effectively swanning around with terrorists. You know? I mean, he was in no way instrumental to the Northern Ireland peace process, which his supporters would have you believe. In fact, I read a piece a while ago that said that he might have actually been detrimental to it, which honestly I could believe as well. But he did very, very well against Owen Jones, because anyone could sign up to the Labour Party to vote. It cost £3 to sign up and vote. And so literally it was 200,000 people signed up to Labour to be able to vote for their candidate. And a lot of them were like my friends and family. Very middle class, very concerned with what they perceive to be the poor, but not really people who know the poor. They've never spent any time with the poor. I have. You know, I've actually been legitimately poor. I have lived in legitimately working class areas. I don't think a lot of my friends have. They went to university, and unlike me, I dropped out after 2 years, and I decided, fuck it. I didn't want to do computer science. I just had no interest in education, at least the education I was doing. And so I dropped out, and I ended up moving around, and I ended up working in various jobs and living with my friends, blah, blah, blah. And they didn't. They ended up integrating themselves into the system. They ended up working their way up, as they should. Don't get me wrong. They made the wise choice. I didn't. But I do think I have a perspective on the world that they missed out on, because they didn't end up scraping the bottom of the barrel like I did. But anyway, Jeremy Corbyn came out of nowhere in the public's imagination, effectively. And he became the leader of the Labour Party, and then suddenly the public were aware of him. And it was, oh, and he'd won by a significant margin, as you can see here. Sorry, no, this is actually not the first one. This is the second one that we're looking at here. I should have checked in advance. This is the second Labour leadership election that was against Owen Smith. And I can't remember why they'd called one, but I'm guessing it was because there was a great deal of lack of confidence in Jeremy Corbyn, because he wasn't the establishment man within the Labour Party. The Labour Party split up between what is effectively the Socialists and the Blairites. The Socialists hate the Blairites, and I imagine the Blairites hate the Socialists. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn was scrapping with my old girlfriend Jess Phillips. She said that she would knife him in the front if it came to it, and things like this. And Jeremy Corbyn has weathered, I think it was 2 backbench rebellions within his own party. And this is why I said, look, if he actually does lose this, there is not going to be any saving him. I mean, you had close friends and allies and ideological compadres like Owen Jones. And I did a video on this on my channel. I took a clip of it. He literally said, and I quote, "In a 2-horse race, Jeremy Corbyn comes third behind Don't Know." He turned on Jeremy Corbyn, and he's an arch-socialist like Corbyn. He is absolutely ideologically convinced of the rightness of what they're doing, and there's no convincing them out of it. And if he can turn around and say, look, Jeremy Corbyn probably has to go, he's probably going to cost us this election, you know that if they do suffer this defeat, Corbyn will be forced to resign. And that's despite the very powerful cult of personality that took over the Labour Party, the hundreds of thousands of diehard Corbynistas that joined. So what I'm saying is, this tweet was completely accurate, and I stand by it today, because it was done at a time before something else happened. Something completely radical happened that utterly changed the situation. Suggesting that this is somehow an ill-informed tweet is not true. There is a lot of things that were informing what I was saying here. And I mean, a lot of people who are politically savvy know all these things. This was no great surprise to a lot of people, obviously. But it's not like I was making it... It's not like I was being blasé or just like bandwagoning or something like this. This was a reasoned position. It was just a month before the Conservatives had put out their manifesto and started refusing to debate, refusing to stand up for themselves, refusing to actually campaign, and instead almost deliberately trying to alienate the electorate. But again, I don't think it was deliberate. I think that they were kind of... You end up getting sort of cult mentalities with this sort of thing. And you end up with arrogance and hubris. If all you're doing all day is seeing how, well, the electorate is basically going to vote for you because they hate the Labour Party, they hate Jeremy Corbyn, they're never going to do it. They find him arrogant and pompous and moralising and prim. They don't like him. And so they're not going to vote for him. And he's not really behind Brexit. He's not really against immigration. He's not really their man. But if you turn yourself into what is effectively their enemy by trying to victimise your own fucking people, the people who are voting for you because Corbyn is an awful alternative, then yeah, they're going to turn on you. That's bloody stupid. And this is something that nobody could have predicted. I mean, it's so staggeringly dumb. And, well, as Katie here says, arrogant. Shockingly arrogant. And like we've seen with the other MPs, they're furious. I mean, I would be shocked if Theresa May survives her own tenure, to be honest. I don't mean like she's going to be killed, but she'll just be removed. Especially as a new chief of staff apparently is a Remainer, who called Nigel Farage a bigot and a racist. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's oh god. Why would you... I mean, these people aren't popular, you know? These idiots who spout this kind of shit are not popular. Just so you know, Theresa. Don't know why you're appointing this guy. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. So, yeah, I just wanted to let you know that it's not like this wasn't a bad tweet. And this is the thing. Like, people going, oh, this didn't age well. Well, why would it? It didn't age well the second the Tories brought on the manifesto, but you didn't say anything then. You know, if you'd asked me, I would have said, well, I would have come back to this and said, well, this isn't going to happen now, is it? You know, I mean, they're not running on a pro-Brexit platform, bizarrely. Bizarrely enough, they actually weren't just hammering Brexit at every goddamn event. They should have been. I kept making the joke that Theresa May, all she had to do is come out 10 Downing Street and say Brexit, immigration, we're going to get them sorted, and then just go back in. That's all she needed to do. Don't write a manifesto, don't do anything else. Let Jeremy Corbyn dig his own grave. But anyway, so yeah, I just thought I'd explain to people who don't understand what political predictions are. They're based on the context in which the prediction is made. If things then later change, then the prediction becomes obsolete because things have changed. If things don't change, then the prediction, or at least not significantly, then the prediction remains valid, doesn't it? And just a quick thing, it's not a prophecy, Thunderfoot. It's not a prophecy, mister. I've been on the wrong side of every political issue I've ever taken, apart from feminism. And, oh yeah, who else was that? Oh yeah, Devon Tracy, yeah. Let's see, how's that blunt force trauma? So yeah, maybe you shouldn't go throwing stones if you're living in glass houses. But to everyone else, obviously, I hope this explains what I thought and why I thought it. And I think you'll be able to see it's from a cogent political analysis. It's not, there's nothing incorrect or lacking in this analysis, I think. It was just we couldn't have known Theresa May was going to come out and blow her own fucking head off.